Go. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. It is the May 9th edition, the year is 2022 of Abel Marketing's Facebook Live. And I have with me this morning Allison McMillan from Jametec Consulting. So we're going to get started and dive right in. Welcome, Allison. How are you?
Good. How are you doing, Ben?
I'm doing really good. So in doing a little advanced research before today, I realized that in having you on as a guest, I'm entering into something that I literally know nothing about. And so I sent you some info in advance and I had a look at your LinkedIn profile. So I'm going to start dropping some stuff in the public chat here while we chat, because I basically just want people to be able to see info on you. So I've just shared the link to your website. Yeah, www.jametec.com. I'm going to do a little bit about company bio here. There you go. So why don't we get started and you tell us a little bit about why you started Jametec Consulting.
Yeah, so I started it because there's a huge gap in the market between what purchasing officers want and business owners actually being able to submit the bid. So anything over $25,000 goes out to public contract. So people think when they hear government contract, they think bridges, they think military, they think these really big multi-million-dollar projects. But it's anything over $25,000. So it includes janitorial, web design, executive coaching I've seen. If you can think of it, there's probably been a government contract for it.
It would make sense. It would make sense.
Yeah, and it's very open and transparent, and purchasing officers want more companies bidding, but businesses either don't know that there's a contract out there in their area. These things open and close in a couple weeks, or they don't have the hours dedicated to read the RFP, write the bid. So yeah, that's sort of why I started it, was because there's a big gap between what purchasing officers want and what a business owner can actually do.
Right. And there's one thing I think I heard at the beginning. I know we've got a list of kind of organized questions, Allison, but one of the things at the beginning you said something about was it a purchasing officer? So what is a purchasing officer, so people know? I mean, it sounds obvious, right? But it's someone who works for the BC government, basically, or works for government.
Not just the BC government. So it's within the a municipality will have a purchasing officer that's in charge of making sure their government organization spends money well, and anything over $25,000 has to go out to public tender. So that's the person that's in charge of it. Some municipalities have a purchasing department of one. For bigger contracts for federal, things go with PSPC, Procurement Services, something of Canada. And then that's a whole team. Where they are the ones who evaluate and they decide what the criteria are and who the contract should be awarded to.
Interesting. So it can be like I worked in a municipality once upon a time. And so there's municipal people, obviously purchasing officers, provincial and federal. So these roles are, I guess they're linked primary to government organizations, or just, I guess a purchasing officer can work anywhere. I'm just trying to understand how that works.
Yeah, a purchasing officer can work anywhere. They usually just work for their organization. Federally, they do have that the PSPC that do it for D&D, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. So if a contract, that they'll have it go to them. But every different organization has their own.
Okay, great. So let's move on. Yeah. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you. I'm going to say let's move on from it because we don't want to get stuck on that one piece. And so, and looking at your website, there's one thing I was reading, how Jametec helps you win government contracts. Let's maybe share that in the chat as well, because it gives you a quick breakdown of the process required. And so, how do people find out about you? That's the question. Because you're on a marketing show or you're working with somebody who is a marketer. So people are always asking me, how can I get found online, or how can I get found, by organizations?
That's one thing I need to get better at, is being found.
Right.
Because how I've gotten all my clients is either by referral.
Right.
So it's just like this. I meet you, you understand what I do, and
Right.
I then we start working together.
Okay.
Or if there was a specific contract that comes available, like
Yeah.
janitorial comes out all the time. It's
Oh,
actually the
interesting.
number one area that's posted on BC Bid, because all the municipalities, they all have their own contracts. All
That
the
makes
big
sense.
government,
That makes sense. BC Bid. So I should look up BC Bid and drop it in for everybody.
yeah.
Okay,
Well,
great.
it's a
I'll do
bad
that.
website.
Well, I just kind of like, I did some research, but I want to provide some value to people watching, right? And so I'm going to
Yeah,
drop these
BC,
links in the chat, right? So that
yeah,
people can see what's going on. So we had a couple sort of questions there. What is your background then in bids and the government procurement process? Like you said on your LinkedIn profile, you worked for, was it Raymond James for, it looks like a decade. So you worked there for quite a while.
yeah.
Is
I
that
was
how
there.
you got started? Like, I don't understand Raymond James at all. So
So that
who they are,
I
what they
was
do.
the Yeah, at Raymond James, I was an investment analyst. So
Right.
I had a lot of experience studying really long documents to extract important
Right.
information.
Right.
Uh, yeah,
Okay.
so that's sort of how that was my experience there. And then when I was looking at starting my own business, where
Uh-huh.
there was a need in the market,
Yeah.
with the skills that I have, that's then when I moved into bid writing and bid responses, because I was talking with purchasing officers and they were
Mhm.
saying like they either don't get enough bids or any bids at all. Sometimes things open and close and they get nothing and then they have to repost it, still
Right.
nothing,
Right.
or the bids that they get are non-compliant because they can't check your website. They can't just check your website if you don't answer something. Things need to fill the mandatory criteria.
Okay.
So that's why I started.
Right. And so people know, and I mention this often, is you and I met through Marshall Stern, who I've worked with as a coach, and he's
Yeah,
been a guest on the show. We met through the Connect and Collaborate group that happens on Wednesday mornings at 11 live. And I'm
it's a
actually
great
going to,
group.
yeah, it is a great group. That's how we met. And I found people to come on the show from that group because I found really good professionals in that group in different walks of life or different professions, all relevant to what I do with small business. And so I just want to see if I can find it here, or if not, I'll drop it in after. But let's keep going. And so when you're working with a new client, how do you get started with them? Like, what is it about it, like a new client that gets attracted to you? Or you said it's all through referral, so take me through that a little bit.
Yeah, so it's referral, or I'll have a specific contract that I'm looking for
Hmm.
a client for, like janitorial. Like I said, it comes out often, and
Interesting. That's interesting. I wonder why. I
well,
wonder why.
why they're not being bid on, or why.
Yeah, or like just why they come up the most. Like it's interesting to me. I don't know why. I guess people, it's all like cleaning and
Yeah.
basically maintenance, right?
Well, yeah, like buildings need to get cleaned, and there's so many government buildings around, so many.
Right.
Like your town hall, they need to
Yeah.
have a contract for that. If they have an office building, I was just pointing because I know that there's one right over there. That
Yeah,
needs
because you're in.
that
Yeah,
needs a
right. So
separate
you're in
contract.
Sydney, right? You're in Sydney,
Yeah,
just so people know. Okay, Sydney,
yeah,
BC.
I'm in Sydney.
Lovely
Um,
Sydney.
like the Department of National Defense, they have bases all over the place, and all
Yeah,
of
of course.
those, the buildings sometimes are joined together in the same contract, but sometimes they're not because they have different security requirements for each one.
Right.
So because of that, they come up often, and they're 2 to 3 year contracts usually.
Right. So how did it change? Maybe this is a bit of a curveball question, but how did it change with the pandemic? Because I mean, we just come through and we're still in the pandemic. It's been 2 years. How did it change in terms of like government buildings and contracts and bids and stuff in the pandemic? Because if people can't go into an office building to work, does the building just like stand empty or
A
how?
lot of municipalities actually had their workers still need to come into the office because they
Interesting.
weren't set up
Oh, okay.
have people work from home.
Right.
Yeah, I know at least of two. Um, within my area that they had people that still needed to come in because they just weren't set up with the infrastructure. Like when they're prioritizing spending, so a lot of them still came in, and actually a lot of janitorial contracts had higher prices because they needed to do enhanced COVID cleaning.
Oh, so it's actually a boon for them to with COVID in a sense, right? Because I guess with enhanced cleaning measures, masks
need more time. You need to make sure everyone's wearing PPE. Different vaccination requirements for different municipalities and areas. Yeah, it was actually. I just did a janitorial one, and they had it that they wanted you to price for enhanced COVID cleaning on 2 days a week.
Right.
So,
of course.
Yeah, more hours.
More hours and more work, and then I guess when that stuff goes away, it goes back to the way it was, or how much do things change? And so let's talk a little bit about this then. Like, what things are you looking for indicating that the client's a fit for you? What do you see that makes you go with all your experience? And you see, like you say, janitorial is one of the top categories, or you see bids out there and nobody's bidding on them.
Yeah, janitorial is one that definitely is constantly coming up. So it's good to have clients in that area. And those ones go really underbid. Like I bid on one for here in Victoria, and there were probably 20 to 30 companies that theoretically could have applied, but they only received 4.
Interesting.
Yeah. So when I look for a new client, I usually look for someone that they're established in their business. They do what they do very well. So they're happy to outsource the actual bidding process and to minimize their own risk.
So you're basically a B2B versus a B2C then, right? Like you're a business to business, working with other businesses. You don't necessarily work. Well, I mean, I don't want to say you don't work with the end customer, but your customer or your client is another business.
I'm definitely B2B.
Interesting.
Although a lot of B2C companies can apply for bids. It's interesting. There's a lot of bids out there, like for a B2C or a B2C company that could bid. There was one that came out that they needed like personal hygiene supplies, like soaps and toothbrushes and things like that.
Right. Interesting. So there's all these people around. So what's the most exciting project you've done to date? Like we've talked about some fairly straightforward, straight ahead kind of stuff.
I feel
what's been some really interesting or really rewarding or exciting projects?
I feel like they're always rewarding because it's so decentralized. It really keeps me on my toes. I always need to be reading the RFPs. You can't make any assumptions just because you worked on one maybe for that organization 3 months ago doesn't mean it has the same requirements with this one. So it keeps me on my toes. I took one client's revenue from $100,000 annually to $400,000 with government contracts. And that's multi-year contracts. Like that's reliable revenue that they will be able to grow their business in other ways. And they don't have to worry about
that's awesome. That's a great selling point for you marketing your business. That's what people want to see, right?
Yeah.
I'll help people write content or like a landing page for this one company, right? And that's what you always want to do when you're copywriting and you have that kind of stat that stands out to people. I took your business $300,000 an increase in revenue, which is huge, especially even if it's in a pandemic, right? Like that someone was out there, that kind of revenue is like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And then there's certain industries, like it sounds like with yours or with janitorial or whatever, people don't think it's glamorous, but it's necessary. And then you take someone's revenue up that much. That's like a threefold,
and it's reliable revenue that they know that they're going to be able to count on. Which means a lot.
That's
in the pandemic. I had one as well that they were like, by getting this contract, we don't need to lay people off for the next 6
which is
months.
awesome, right? Which is awesome, right? Yeah, because that's what happened to so many people that during the pandemic. Oh, laid off. I mean, it happens, right? It's just you don't ever like to see it. And then you hear stories like this, and you're like, well, this is fantastic. That there's, I think you can't generalize with the pandemic. I think there's lots of positives that have come out of it. despite all the negative stuff that's happened, right?
Yeah, and one thing that also came out of the pandemic was, I would say the majority of public institutions now have some sort of electronic bid submission, so you don't need to actually hand deliver your bid anymore, which is great.
So you actually have to hand deliver a bid by how? By like in
Sometimes.
person? In person?
Either by courier or by
Oh, interesting.
registered mail.
That
Most
makes
don't do
sense.
that, though.
Interesting. Courier or registered mail, and now you can do it electronically. When you
Mhm.
think about how the way businesses, even pre-pandemic, you would think most people would send something in electronically anyway.
Yeah, it was the trend before the pandemic, and then the pandemic just sort of pushed most entities into it.
Wow. I really want to thank you for coming on. This has been a great talk and
Thanks for
very
having me.
informative. And we pretty much wrapped up all our questions and comments. So I don't know if there's anything else that you want to add, because please feel free to take the floor for a few seconds and add something. I welcome it.
Uh, yeah, it was great to be on here. Great to explain it, sort of what I do. Like I said, there's so many contracts that come out. So
Mhm.
even if you don't think that your business, that there's a government contract for your business, you'd be surprised. Like
Okay.
executive coaching, I recently saw was on there. I thought of Marshall. Um,
Yeah, of course. Of
yeah,
course.
like there's a lot of opportunity out there. So if anybody has any questions, please reach out to
Okay.
me. I'm happy to
Yeah,
talk.
and I put all the information here in the comments. I'll come up on the Facebook Live that
Yeah.
people know how to reach out to you directly, www.jametec.com. And I gave a comment about a rundown on what the business does. And thanks for joining in, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, sounds great.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.